Hello everyone, thank you for joining our webinar today. My name is Ben Dorothy, I'm Senior Delivery Manager at Analytium. Today we're going to talk to you about migrating insurance company to SAS Global Hosting. So I'm joined today by Iksana and Pavel. So Iksana is a data engineering consultant with us here at Analytium and working within my SAS team, and Pavel is a senior data scientist, also working at Analytium and working as part of the my SAS team as well. So today we're going to take you through the presentation, and I'll tell you a bit more about the agenda now. So if you can move to the next slide, please. So if you have any questions today, you can use the Q&A as we go through the presentation today. You can also put your questions in the chat window, and we'll try to address these as we go. Otherwise, we'll pick them up at the end. So we'll start off with a bit of an introduction to Analytium and my SAS team, and I will take you through an introduction to the case study that we're presenting on today. Pavel will then pick up and talk to you through the steps of the migration path, followed by Iksana, who will talk through some of the regression testing and processes that we do as part of that migration path as well. We'll have some time at the end to share a few lessons learned that we've had in our recent experiences, and also some time for some questions as well. So without further ado, we'll move on to the introduction. So as mentioned, we are from Analytium, and within Analytium we have a brand, my SAS team. So we believe we're in a world where small and medium-sized businesses can be transformed through better utilizing the data within. So my SAS team offers data management solutions to enable your company to make some exciting discoveries within your data, and also allow you to take some bold action upon on those discoveries as well. So whether it's giving you access to data, building reports, or providing some innovative tools to surface the value in your data, we can support you through that journey. So we don't just deliver products and services, we partner with you and can help deliver your long-term data strategies as well. So we are a UK-based consultancy. However, we do have resource and capability within the UK and Europe. We have also partners that we work with within the UK and Europe. We're vendor independent, so we work with multiple technologies, but here today we're going to primarily be focusing on SAS. And we also offer advisory and consultancy services. So we also, as mentioned, we can support you not just with delivering solutions, but we can help take you on that full journey of discovery and realization of your strategy in data and reporting as well. So the key industries that we operate in, but not exclusively, are in financial services and insurance, but we do also work with clients in manufacturing and higher education as well. And some of our partners include SAS, Microsoft, and Matillion. So on to the next slide, please. So this is a bit more detail here about how we can work with your organization, from the definition and planning of projects, setting strategies, through to the implementation, management and support of those solutions, and also the ongoing analysis and optimization of those services as well. Next slide. Some of our partners and customers here as well. So we've shown again some of the technology partners, but also one of our regional partners, which is LACO, who we operate with in Belgium and across Europe. Some of the customers that we've worked with as well recently with SAS and Microsoft. So a bit more about our partnership with SAS. So we are a silver partner and reseller of SAS software. We also are recognised as a Microsoft partner and work with both in that relationship. We have approved consultants and accreditations in SAS programming, and we also have experience working with SAS Global Hosting. So as you're aware, this presentation today is talking about how to migrate or an upgrade to SAS Viy hosted by the SAS Global Hosting team. So as we move forward, we'll focus more on that. So what about our experience with SAS Viy? So we've delivered projects migrating clients and installing SAS Viy 3.5 and SAS and Viy 4. We've migrated some customers in insurance, financial services and insurance domain to the SAS Viy platform, some of which hosted by SAS Global Hosting and others hosted and supported on other instances. We also provide platform support to a number of organisations, including UK universities, where we also have an initiative with SAS, where we're supporting the adoption of SAS Viy across universities. We've been an early adopter in the SAS Analytics Pro programme and took part in the testing of that software in the recent year. And we have obviously in progress projects and deployments happening right now, so in the retail sector and also with some European government organisations as well. So let's move into the case study. So the case study we're going to talk about today is based on a recent project where we've migrated a leading insurance company within Europe to SAS Viy 4 with SAS Global Hosting. So I'll start off by talking you through a bit about the project scope and the success criteria that this project was focused on. So in terms of background, this client was looking to migrate from SAS 9.4 on-prem to SAS Viy 4 in the cloud. They were experiencing quite high costs of their current infrastructure, and were looking to realise some cost-saving improvements there. And they also had a number of controls which needed to be addressed across their platform, so covering security and also some of their route to live processes as well. So they were looking for a modernised platform, obviously improvements to their security model, and better value for money as well in terms of the performance and supportability as well. So they were looking for a better return for investment on their long-term support service and costs. So some reasons why a client would choose SAS hosted on the cloud. So obviously it comes fully supported and backed by SAS. So obviously where all of the expertise within SAS resides, you would have one single point of engagement and proactive support and monitoring of your platform and infrastructure, and dedicated contacts for your platform. And the infrastructure software is ongoingly optimized as well. So all of your platform patching upgrades are all taken care of for you, and SAS carry that out on whichever upgrade or patching agreement that you wish to proceed with. You can get up and running pretty quickly with SAS on cloud. Obviously that does come with the caveat of how large your SAS estate is and how many reports, how much data and code you have to migrate. But you might have seen some of our other webinars where we bring up SAS Viy on cloud in a matter of minutes. And the fifth reason we've got here is around high availability. So obviously the scalability of the infrastructure that SAS provide on the hosted cloud and the SLAs and resilience associated with that is what you would expect for that with a service at this level. Okay, so let's talk a bit about the approach to migration. So the typical migration project is broken into different phases. So we'd start with the scoping of the project, so confirming what the scope of migration is, understanding what the client's existing infrastructure contains, what is in scope to move to the new infrastructure. This work is done sometimes in partnership with SAS, and sometimes SAS lead this themselves. And but this is a very important part of the process. Once scope and requirements have been agreed, and sometimes often a platform assessment performed in the early stages, we've moved into the design stage, looking at the architectural design, the software configuration, security model, and also the strategy we're going to take to development and modification of our migration tools and testing of those configurations as well. There's a lot of preparation that goes into the migration. So we, our team, along with SAS Global Hosting, would obviously install and configure SAS, but we would also install our own migration tools, the SAS migration tools, as well as our own bespoke ones to carry out some analysis and modification to SAS components. And Pavel will talk a bit more about that soon. We have obviously the migration step itself. So this is the movement of all of your components into SAS Viy on the cloud, the implementation of the security model, and obviously the testing of that as well. And then you have a test phase. So this is where you work very closely with your client to understand the test requirements, which we do very early in the process. Actually, in the design stage, we start to talk about the test strategy and how that's going to unfold. And then finally, deployment. The handover and deployment of the product for the client back into their BAU operations, but also for the client handing over into the support of SAS Global Hosting. So all of that, from my point of view as delivery manager, is supported by some project delivery methodology. This slide shows from left to right the process that I've just described at a high level, but shows a bit more detail about what we produce through a typical migration project as well. So those grey boxes are deliverables, and these provide us traceability throughout the delivery, from the initial high-level requirements and scope through our design documentation and design components, our test strategy, test scripts, and through to deployment plan as well. So this is quite an important part of our project governance, but equally as important are the tasks themselves. So these are the maroony type coloured boxes. So particularly the ones in the implement phase, and this is what Pavel is going to talk to you about next. So this is the hands-on work that we do during the migration project. So on that note, Pavel, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. And actually, a lot of preparation was done and supported by SAS Global team, so which is good in this case. But we'll talk about part that we did in this project, in the migration project, and we will talk about two main two of the main concerns during migration process and how we dealt with them. So these two great concerns are migration of SAS code and migration of SAS datasets. And as a reminder, now we're talking about the migration from SAS 9 to the SAS hosted cloud environment, SAS Viy. So all necessary SAS code files and SAS datasets had to be moved to the cloud, but it wasn't enough to transfer all the necessary files to a new platform. SAS code files and SAS datasets required some preparation before they could be used in SAS Viy in a new environment. And we will talk about why this preparation was needed and how we did it and how it can be done. It must be noted that in our case, it was very important to automate the whole process of migration, of preparing SAS code files and SAS datasets for several reasons. And first, the old platform of our client contained roughly 20,000 SAS code files and about 15,000 SAS datasets, too many for manual processing. Second reason is company continued using the old platform during the migration process, and the users were constantly changing SAS code and datasets. So we needed a tool to update SAS code files and datasets after we migrated them to a new platform. And another reason is during the migration process, new client-specific requirements for changes in code were arising. So we had to change code again and again as these new requirements arose. So let's briefly review different stages of SAS code and SAS dataset migration that we automated. And here you can see that first we used a Python script to scan all SAS code files to analyze them and determine the scope of changes necessary for migration to SAS Viy. And then we used also Python scripts to make the necessary changes, change hard-coded paths in SAS code, change encoding of text files, including SAS programs. Then we had to adapt functions and call routines in SAS code, increase character length, and make other changes in code according to client's needs. And then we also had to subset data sets that were necessary for migration from SAS 9 to a new platform, and then change encoding of these data sets to UTF-8, and of course move data sets and code to a new platform, to the cloud, and compare and validate data sets. And now let's talk about some of these stages in more details. So the next slide shows an example of the first stage we talked about when we analyzed all SAS code files, and we received a list of necessary changes in all SAS code files. And you can see here just a sample what changes need to be done and how many, and this information later was used for planning of testing and validation. So and Oksana will talk more about it. later. So we received this list of necessary changes. So we received the scope of changes in all the files. And then next slide shows an example of these changes, how we did changes in SAS code files. We also used a Python script for this to scan SAS files and make these changes. And here you can see the change of hard-coded paths. So, for example, and actually we had both Unix and Windows style paths in SAS files. So we had to change them all according to the new folder structure, which was supposed to be on a new platform. So on the top, you see in yellow the old path on the old platform. Just an example. It could be in the libname statement or file name statement or let or in some other place. So we had to change all this programmatically to avoid manual work. So there were a lot of such changes. And next slide shows other changes that were done also programmatically in SAS files. And here you see increasing of character length and adapting functions and call routines. And why it was needed, first of all, let me say a couple words about this. The reason is because the old platform used Latin 1 encoding, and SAS Viy, SAS Viy, the only available session encoding for SAS Viy is UTF-8. So it means that when some of the characters in Latin 1 could occupy maybe 1 byte, in UTF-8, this character could occupy 2 or 3 even bytes. So the so using traditional string functions in UTF-8 could cause truncation of could cause unpredicted results, because these functions assume that the size of a character is 1 byte only, and the specified position is always the byte position. And this is true with single byte character set, but in SAS Viy, as I said, some characters may occupy more than 1 byte, and these functions may not work properly. So we used K equivalents of these functions. SAS has this so-called K functions, which are suitable for working in UTF-8 with multi-byte characters. And so we used these functions to replace the traditional string functions. And the same kind of the same thing, because of UTF encoding, the character length had to be increased to fit all the old strings in the new environment. Okay, next slide shows the example of the code changes in the file. All changes in the code were listed at the end of SAS files, and this was done to allow users to have control over this change and adjust code if necessary. So we not just changed the code, but we listed all the changes for users to see if he needs to adapt it. Okay, and now let's briefly talk about datasets. Datasets also had to be prepared to be used in SAS Viy. And the first thing we had to do is to bring all the data sets from different machines, Windows machine, Unix machine, in one place. And so subset data set needed for migration. And we used shell script and Python script for that. And then the important step is changing encoding of datasets to UTF-8. And as I said earlier, SAS Viy uses UTF-8 in encoding, and the old platform was used Latin 1 encoding, where every character is represented using 1 byte. So to adapt to a new encoding, to avoid truncation of data in datasets, all datasets had to be encoding of all datasets had to be changed to UTF-8, and we did it with SAS script programmatically, and then we used Python script, also a shell script, to zip data, to archive data, all data sets, and send them to a new platform using SFTP. And SAS Global Hosting team helped us to unzip this data on a new platform and place data and code to new folders, new folder structure. And the last thing is comparing and validating. We used SAS script for that to compare SAS 9 dataset with new migrated dataset, which is already was in UTF-8 and was on a new platform. So this is briefly about this process that we automated, process of migration of code files and data sets, and Oksana will talk about the next step.
Thanks, Pavel. So we're just going to talk a little bit about regression testing and validation process. And this process might seem easy, but it might require even more time than the migration itself because of the involvement of different teams and different processes for testing. So it's very important, as Ben has mentioned earlier, to plan and to confirm the test strategy beforehand, even on the first step of the migration project. And the main point in this test strategy is the testing coverage. It should at least cover 3 main dimensions. The first dimension is SAS code changes. And we have already talked about the need to have an instrument that lists all of the strings that need to be changed. And while we are creating our test strategy, we simply list all of these instances where we had to manually change some part of the function or some formats or paths or whatever. And the second dimension is the test cycle. Test cycle is some big part of the test plan, which requires the involvement of a single team so as to ensure that the other teams are not distracted and that we are focusing on some selected range of programs at the current time. And the third dimension will be the testing sequence, which is important to ensure that the most important processes and the processes which are run by several teams are tested as a first priority. So how do we actually conduct the validating SAS code execution? It is complete, like several steps needs to be conducted. The first step is to define the inputs for the test run, and it might include some overview of the initial version of the code, because there might be several micro variables or several manual inputs that we need to populate. And probably at this stage, we really need the help from the client to understand this first requirements. The second stage is to actually execute a process in native and target environment simultaneously. And in our particular case, we had to choose some exact timing when the client is running the same piece of code as we do, so as to ensure that the continuing update of the database will not result in any errors, disruptions, or discrepancies at the later stages. The third step will be to check the program logs and conduct an investigation for any possible errors. And I would say that at this stage, SAS hosting services will be of the most importance, since some of the errors might be caused by the environment and SAS Cloud. So this help is very much in need. The fourth step is to check the generated outputs, basically not comparing them at this particular stage, but just making sure that they have been generated, and sometimes that the emails have been sent, or some other outputs to be saved in the correct locations. And as a result of this process, the test evidence document is being populated with the different parameters, and this document is the main deliverable document for the testing stage. And finally, I would like to say a couple of words about the dataset comparison. It may be done in various ways. However, for our test case, it was important to automate SAS datasets comparison, because they made up about 90% of all output data overall. And in order to do such comparison, we decided to do a bit more advanced version of ProCompare, to write our own customized program, which returns the report of the form, which you can see on the slide. So we have all of the outputs listed and all of the types of controls in the columns. So you can immediately understand where the problem has occurred and take immediate action. And I think that's it about the regression testing stage. And let's quickly go to the lessons learned, and I will give a word to Ben.
Thank you, Oksana. Yeah, so in this next section, we're going to just look at some of the lessons learned, or topics that came up for us on recent projects, which we think are important to call out and pay particular attention to. So the first one was around email configuration. So you would think that the setup and configuration of email on your new platform would be straightforward. And of course, you do get out of the box functionality on your Viy platform with email. But there are some other considerations that you need to take into account early in your project. So when you're documenting the requirements, and specifically around the email functionality, we need to understand the specifics of what SAS Global Hosting offer with email on the platform, because as you can understand, the platform is a shared cloud platform. There are policies that need to be adhered to, both within SAS for data security and GDPR, but also with the client or the customer as well. So once you've bottomed out the detailed requirements and responded to those requirements in your design, obviously there are many different ways security can be configured when sending secure email out of a public cloud platform. So that would depend upon both the infrastructure environments that SAS are operating, and also the customer. So there's a lot of detail that needs to be worked through in the design stage and in requirements. And also you need to plan some time for seeking approvals from both sides as well. So, with data policies and GDPR, there's often waiver or approval processes that need to be gone through to sanction sharing of data outside of a cloud platform, and the safe and ensuring the safe transit of that data into the client environment. So that's the first point I would raise. And moving on to data transfer. So Pavel obviously took us through how in this case study we approached the transfer of data. But again, this is something that needs to be trialed and tested quite soon in the project, again, back at the requirements and design phases, because there are many different ways you can meet the requirement of data transfer. And obviously that will depend upon, again, the customer environment, security policies. We need to look at consider the volume of data, the frequency of data transfer that we need to have, and there's also additional work required to configure that connectivity as well, and that data transfer between the client and the SAS Global Hosting environment. So there are potentially at least 2 teams that need to be involved, but once you get into the security and configuration and testing of bandwidth, to move the amount of data you need to move in the timescales you need, you can start to involve quite a lot of teams in that. You also need to think about the compression method that you use, because there's more than one way to compress your data when you before you transfer it. So we found in the recent project that we had to trial and test many different methods before we found an optimum solution that worked with the method of data transfer we had, and our limitations around bandwidth at the time as well. And the final point on this would be to remember to automate as much as possible. So as Pavel described, we automated the updating of the transfer and updating of the deltas as much as we could. I think it was pretty much hands off, apart from pressing the go button. And finally, the testing strategy. So the only point I'd say here is not to underestimate the effort required for testing. So when working with insurance company, often your customer has their own priorities and BAU activity that they need to perform, and you need to consider the impacts of testing upon that activity, the availability of the key SMEs, especially with their priority processes. So such as Solvency II or IFRS. So many companies would require at least a 2-month run of a change to any of these processes before acceptance. So you really need to go into a lot of detail around how and when this can be tested, having the right people involved, and working closely with the identification of what those priority programs are, as well as meeting the desired level of test coverage for those programs that you've modified and tested as well. And again, automate this as much as you can. So we have developed our own tools to automate testing to a point that can significantly reduce the effort. So that's the last point on lessons learned. I think that now brings us to the end of the presentation. So we're now open to any questions that anybody has raised or has. I can't see any open questions in the Q&A at this time, and the chat is also clear. But if anyone does have any questions, they can feel free to reach out to either of us directly. you can contact us using those QR codes, and also you can reach out to us at Analytium using the email address and phone number there. So yeah, thank you, Oksana, Pavel, for presenting today, and thank you for also for attending, everyone. And that's all from us. Thank you.